He thought he knew the desert, and himself, until a fierce, mysterious woman arrived and turned his quiet life upside down. The desert sun stretched over the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the dusty expanse of Luke's ranch. Cacti dotted the landscape like silent sentinels, and the air shimmered with heat even as a faint breeze carried the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. Luke adjusted the brim of his worn hat, squinting at the horizon as he guided his horse along the fence line. Every day followed the same rhythm: check the cattle, mend fences, refill water troughs, and retreat to the small cabin he had called home since his parents passed years ago. Luke had always been more comfortable with animals than people. Livestock didn't question him, didn't laugh at his awkward pauses or his shyness. They responded to his calm voice and steady hand, and in their simplicity, he found solace. Human interaction, on the other hand, left him anxious and tongue-tied. Even casual conversations with neighbors made his palms sweat, his words stumble, and his heart race. It wasn't that Luke disliked people. He simply lacked confidence, a trait that had become more pronounced with each passing year of solitude. His friends from town had long given up trying to push him into social gatherings, and Luke had found comfort in the routine of isolation. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a longing, quiet, almost imperceptible, for someone who could understand him, who could challenge him, and perhaps even inspire him. That afternoon, Luke paused beside the well, wiping the sweat from his brow. His horse, a sturdy brown mare named Bella, nuzzled his shoulder. "Almost done," he murmured. His voice was soft, barely louder than the rustle of desert grass. As he adjusted the bucket for the water trough, a sudden gust of wind kicked up a swirl of sand, stinging his eyes and forcing him to step back. And then he saw her. A figure appeared on the horizon, moving with purpose and confidence, despite the swirling dust. She was unlike anyone Luke had ever seen. Tall, athletic, and striking, her dark hair whipped around her face in the wind, and her clothing, practical yet bold, marked her as someone used to surviving in harsh conditions. Every step she took seemed deliberate, controlled, and commanding. Luke froze, unsure of what to do. His heart pounded in a mixture of curiosity and intimidation. He had seen travelers before, but none like her, none who exuded strength so effortlessly. He instinctively hid behind Bella, trying to make himself smaller, while also hoping she hadn't noticed him. But of course, she had. The woman's eyes, sharp, observant, yet warm, met his, and she offered a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that she had seen him too. She wasn't threatening, but she wasn't shy either. She carried herself like someone who belonged to the world, someone who had faced challenges head-on and come out stronger. Luke swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, to introduce himself, but his usual awkwardness held him back. Words felt heavy in his throat, and he wasn't sure if he could form a coherent sentence without stammering. She called out over the wind, her voice strong and clear. "Hello. Is there someone here? I could use some shelter from this storm." Her presence was both terrifying and fascinating. Luke realized that the life he had grown so accustomed to, the quiet, predictable solitude, was about to be interrupted in a way he had never imagined. And while fear mingled with the unknown, a spark of curiosity ignited in him too. For the first time in years, Luke felt that maybe, just maybe, life could offer more than routine and loneliness. He squared his shoulders, forcing himself to speak. I can help. Come on over." The words felt strange, almost foreign, but they marked the beginning of a story neither of them could have anticipated. And as the desert wind swept across the plains, carrying the promise of change, Luke sensed that his life, quiet, solitary, and safe, was about to be transformed forever. The desert wind had not relented by the time Luke hurried back to his small cabin, dust clinging to his boots and the cuffs of his sleeves. He had spent the afternoon preparing, stacking firewood, checking the water supply, and making the cabin as welcoming as possible. Though he had never hosted anyone other than a traveling salesman, there was something about this woman that stirred both curiosity and unease in him. By the time he reached the porch, he spotted her emerging from the sandstorm's haze. Zara. Her presence was commanding. The way she walked, steady, unhesitant, made him feel both small and inadequate. Every movement seemed precise, every step measured. She was clearly accustomed to harsh landscapes, able to navigate them with strength and confidence that Luke could only envy. She reached the cabin and paused, surveying the modest home with sharp, discerning eyes. "You live here?" she asked, her voice carrying easily over the wind, a mix of amusement and curiosity. Luke nodded, fumbling with the latch of the door. "Why, yes. You can come in, if you like." His words stumbled over themselves, as they always did in her presence. He realized just how flustered he was, standing barefoot in the dust, his sleeves rolled up, and heart racing in a way it hadn't for years. Zara's smile was slight, teasing, as if she could read his thoughts without him speaking. "Thank you," she said, stepping inside. She brushed sand from her boots and shook her hands briefly, revealing toned arms from the rolled-up sleeves of her practical blouse. The storm came out of nowhere. "Thought I'd find shelter." The cabin, though small and simple, smelled of sage, wood smoke, and the faint tang of the desert air. Luke gestured toward a chair by the fire. You can sit there. I'll get some water." Zara's eyes flicked around the cabin, taking in the rough wooden furniture, the small kitchen, and the piles of firewood stacked neatly in the corner. "You're well prepared," she observed. "I'm impressed." Luke shifted uncomfortably. "I try my best. I mean, it's home." She smiled faintly, and it sent a strange warmth through him. "It's a good home. Practical. Comfortable." Her gaze softened for a moment, just enough for him to glimpse the empathy beneath her confident exterior. They settled into a quiet rhythm at first. Luke handed her a cup of water, and she drank it slowly, surveying him with sharp curiosity. Every now and then, she asked questions, not probing, but observant, about the ranch, the desert, and how he managed everything on his own. Luke found himself answering, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes with more detail than he had expected. He was surprised to find that he enjoyed her attention and perspective, even if it made him self-conscious. Then, as the wind howled outside, she asked the question that startled him. "Do you live alone here?" Luke's throat tightened. "Yes. Mostly. I like it quiet." Zara's laughter, soft but melodic, filled the cabin. "Quiet is good. But sometimes, quiet can be lonely, too. You shouldn't hide too much behind it." He felt a pang of guilt. She could see through him, see his reserve and hesitation, as if she already understood the shy man he had been all his life. As the storm raged on, they talked in fragments, about the desert, the cattle, survival skills, and the nuances of living alone in such a harsh environment. Luke noticed the ease with which she moved around the cabin, the way she lifted heavy wood with practiced strength, the way she seemed completely at home in the wilderness. He realized then that Zara was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was not just a stranger seeking shelter. She was a force of nature, confident, capable, and unafraid. And yet, beneath the bold exterior, there was an understanding, a warmth that made Luke's heart race with a mixture of intimidation and intrigue. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of curiosity, not just about the desert, not just about the ranch, but about the woman standing quietly in the firelight. And as the snow and sand swirled outside, Luke knew his life, the quiet, solitary existence he had long relied upon, was about to be forever changed by the arrival of this remarkable stranger. The morning after the storm, the desert glowed with a muted brilliance. The sun reflected off the sand, casting a soft, golden haze over Luke's ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and warmed earth. Luke stood outside, adjusting the fence rails, when he saw Zara moving across the yard, examining the water trough and the arrangement of feed for the livestock. She moved with ease and purpose, each motion precise, controlled, and confident. "Need some help?" Luke asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zara turned, eyes bright. "I thought I'd start with the basics. Water management, feed rotation. Your cattle need more consistent hydration in this heat." Luke frowned slightly. He had done this all his life. "I think I've got it covered." Zara smiled, playful yet insistent. "Maybe, but sometimes even the most experienced people can miss something. Let me show you a trick or two." Reluctantly, Luke watched as she demonstrated a system of rotating the water troughs to avoid contamination, and she pointed out spots in the pens where shaded areas could be improved to protect the animals from sunburn. She had a keen eye for details he had overlooked for years, a combination of instinct and knowledge that he couldn't help but admire. As the day progressed, she led him beyond the ranch, through small stretches of desert, showing him where natural water sources could be tapped during droughts and how to identify plants safe for the livestock to nibble. Each lesson came with stories of survival, tales from her own travels and adventures that made Luke's eyes widen. "You see," she said, brushing sand from her hands, "it's not just about working hard. It's about understanding the land. The animals. The rhythm of life here. You don't just react, you anticipate." Luke listened, nodding slowly, absorbing the words and the unspoken confidence behind them. He had always focused on routine, repetition, and hard labor. He hadn't realized how much he had missed by not observing, by not trusting his instincts alongside experience. But the lessons weren't limited to ranching. She teased him about his shy mannerisms, coaxing him into conversation with ease, drawing him out of the self-imposed shell he had worn for so long. "Most men your age wouldn't even ask about the desert plants or wildlife, they'd take shortcuts," she said with a teasing grin. "But you're curious. I like that." Luke felt a warmth bloom in his chest. Her words weren't flirtatious, they were honest, observant, and somehow validating. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, unnoticed, almost invisible. But she made him feel seen. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in fiery oranges and pinks, Luke and Zara returned to the ranch. The animals were calmer, the pens better arranged, and the water troughs cleaner than he had ever managed on his own. "You've changed a lot today," Zara said, leaning on the fence beside him. "More confident. More aware. You're learning fast." Luke smiled shyly, brushing a hand through his hair. I never realized how much I didn't know." "And that's okay," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Learning isn't weakness. It's strength." For the first time, Luke felt the sting of excitement, a curiosity about life beyond his routine, a thrill at seeing the world through someone else's perspective. He began to realize that Zara wasn't just helping with the ranch, she was showing him a world he had never dared to explore, a life of confidence, adventure, and connection he hadn't thought possible. That evening, as they settled by the fire in the cabin, Luke found himself smiling more freely, laughing at her dry humor, and feeling a budding sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. Zara's lessons were more than practical, they were transformative. And Luke knew, deep down, that his life was already changing in ways he could hardly have imagined. For the first time in his solitary life, he felt alive. A week after Zara's arrival, the desert's harshness tested Luke and his ranch in ways he hadn't anticipated. Temperatures rose sharply, and the dry wind carried sand that irritated the cattle and dried the scarce water sources. Luke worked tirelessly, but even with Zara's guidance, the challenges began to feel overwhelming. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher named Cole arrived, his face hardened and his tone mocking. Cole had always looked down on Luke's quiet, reserved nature, considering him weak and inexperienced. "Heard you've got yourself a new helper," Cole said, eyes lingering on Zara with a mixture of suspicion and greed. "Think she can handle this place better than you?" Luke stiffened. "She's helping, yes. But she's not here to compete with anyone." Cole laughed harshly. "Careful, Dawson. That desert Amazon of yours might make you forget what's important, or show you how small you really are." Luke's hands clenched, heat rising to his face. He had always avoided confrontation, preferring to focus on the ranch and his animals. But now, with Zara beside him, he felt a surge of determination he hadn't known he possessed. Before he could respond, a loud commotion erupted from the pens. One of the cattle had panicked, knocking over part of a fence and sending several animals toward the edge of the property. Sand and dust swirled around them as Luke and Zara raced to intervene. Zara moved with precision, directing the animals calmly, while Luke hesitated for a brief moment, frozen by fear and uncertainty. He felt inadequate, as if the lesson of the week could not prepare him for this chaos. "Luke. You have to act," Zara called, her voice cutting through the wind. He drew a deep breath, recalling her guidance from previous days, how to anticipate movement, how to stay calm, and how to lead rather than react. With trembling hands, he directed the cattle, guiding them back into the pen with a combination of voice commands and careful movements. By the time the last animal was safely contained, sweat and dust coated their clothes and hair. Luke's heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through him, but a sense of exhilaration replaced the fear. He had faced the chaos, and he had succeeded. Cole, who had watched from a distance, nodded reluctantly. "Seems you've learned a thing or two." Luke met his gaze steadily, no longer shrinking under judgment. "I've learned enough to handle my ranch. That's all I need." Zara stepped closer, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. "You did it. You stayed calm, you trusted yourself, and you saved them." Luke looked at her, feeling a swell of gratitude and something more, a growing admiration for her courage and confidence. "I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled warmly, brushing sand from her sleeve. "I didn't do it for credit. I did it because I knew you could. You just needed to see it for yourself." For the first time, Luke recognized a truth he had long ignored: strength was not about being loud or aggressive. It was about self-belief, calm under pressure, and trusting the skills and knowledge he already had. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in fiery hues, Luke and Zara walked back to the cabin. The day had tested him, challenged him, and shown him what he was capable of. He had risen above his fears, gaining confidence and a sense of purpose that had previously eluded him. Zara's presence had not only guided him through the practical lessons of ranching and survival, it had awakened something deeper. Luke understood now that his world could be larger than the quiet routine he had clung to, that he could embrace challenge, danger, and growth, all while standing beside someone he trusted and admired. That night, as they sat by the fire, Luke felt a quiet pride, and a new kind of hope. The shy rancher was no longer defined by fear or isolation. He was learning, evolving, and discovering the life he had always secretly longed for. And as Zara looked at him with soft, approving eyes, he realized that the greatest lessons were not about the desert or the ranch, but about himself. The desert was quiet that evening, a serene contrast to the chaos of earlier days. The sky burned with the soft reds and purples of sunset, casting long shadows over Luke's ranch. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled warmly, filling the small space with light and comforting heat. Luke stood by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and lingering nervous energy. Zara entered, brushing sand from her boots, her expression calm yet bright with a hint of mischief. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, carrying a small basket of vegetables and herbs she had gathered during the day. "I hope you're hungry." Luke turned to face her, noticing for the first time how her presence filled the room with energy and warmth. He had come to rely on her guidance, not only for ranch work but for life itself. Her confidence had rubbed off on him, and her courage had inspired him to confront challenges he would have previously avoided. "I am," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual, but with an edge of sincerity. "And I'm grateful. For everything." Zara paused, meeting his gaze. There was a softness in her eyes, something unspoken but powerful, that made his heart skip. "You've done more than I could ask for, Luke. You've learned, adapted, and you've grown." He stepped closer, hesitation mingling with resolve. "I've grown because of you. Because you showed me there's more to life than the walls I built around myself." Her smile deepened, a gentle warmth that melted his lingering doubts. "You don't need me to survive," she said. "But I enjoy being part of this life with you." They sat at the small table, sharing a simple meal. The conversation was easy, filled with laughter and quiet moments of understanding. It was the kind of intimacy Luke had never experienced: mutual respect, trust, and a growing affection that did not rush but built steadily, like the desert sands shaped by wind over years. After dinner, Luke stepped outside, the chilly air brushing against his face. The stars were bright, scattered across the sky like diamonds against black velvet. Zara joined him, her hand brushing against his as they stood together on the porch. "I never imagined this," Luke said softly, gazing at the vast desert before them. "Not the ranch, not you. Everything feels bigger now, richer. I didn't know life could feel like this." Zara took his hand, firm and steady. "Life is like that. You just have to be willing to step into it. To take the risk of learning, of trusting, of loving." Luke's heart surged. He had spent years hiding from the world, from connection, and from himself. But now, standing beside her, he understood that love and partnership were not weaknesses, they were strength. Together, they were stronger than either had been alone. "I want this," he said, voice steady with newfound confidence. "I want us. Here, together. Always." Zara's eyes softened, a mix of joy and reassurance. "Then we will," she said, leaning in close. The wind carried their shared laughter across the desert, a sound that blended with the rustling sagebrush and the whisper of the evening breeze. That night, as the fire burned low, Luke and Zara sat side by side on the porch, looking out at the ranch and the desert beyond. They had faced storms, challenges, and doubts, but together they had discovered something far greater than survival: companionship, trust, love, and hope for a future neither had dared to imagine alone. In the heart of the desert, under the vast, star-filled sky, the Shire rancher and the desert Amazon found not just partnership, but the promise of a life full of adventure, warmth, and mutual strength. And for the first time, Luke realized that the world he had always feared to explore was now open to him, and that with Zara by his side, there was nothing he could not face.